Hi everyone and welcome to a special edition of the BC Poly Hot Stove. I'm Jordan Bateman, the Vice President of Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, the mighty ICBA, joined as always from Victoria
by the mighty Orca. I'm Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca, and normally BC Poly Hot Stove is just Jordan and myself. Today, obviously, we have a special guest in studio.
Yes, we have Andrew Wilkinson, leader of the opposition, Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Exactly.
I'm a royalist. I like to drop the Queen in there from time to time. And leader of the BC Liberal Party, and all-around good guy. Andrew Wilkinson, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, Jordan. And good to see you, McLean.
You as well.
It's kind of funny, you guys in Victoria all week, and then you have to actually talk via Skype.
Exactly.
It's great. Well, let's lead off with some of the big issues of the day, and it's never dull. every morning at ICBC, I wake up and I come to work and I think, what fresh hell is John Horgan going to unleash on the economy and on the good working folks of British Columbia? And he never disappoints. There seems to be a fresh issue every day. But let's talk about one where we actually kind of agree with what's happening. That's LNG.
Right.
Andrew, obviously, there's a lot of pressure on BC Liberals to take the first opportunity possible to defeat this government and move on. You could have taken that kind of crass political path on this and found a reason to vote against LNG, but these votes are passing 80 plus to 3.
Yeah.
So tell me about that decision and where you are.
Well, we got to make sure we're serving the interests of British Columbians. And let's be clear, this LNG industry is strongly in the interests of British Columbia. It's a huge capital investment. The talk is $40 billion. It's a huge amount of construction work and a lot of skills development that, interestingly, yesterday on a media outlet, I was saying, look, this is like Norway in the 1970s. Yeah. The fact you don't have someone who's putting together the ultimate gadget for the LNG industry now doesn't mean you don't train them up to do it. And then they can do that work worldwide, just like the Norwegians do, just like the Albertans do. So it's a really desirable industry. The terms have got to be right. So what we're going to be going at the NDP about in this coming week during what's known as the committee stage of the bill is about, is the gas coming from British Columbia? Are the workers coming from British Columbia? And the corporate taxes, where are those going to get booked and where are they going to get paid? So those are the three things we're really keen on with the NDP. There are a bunch of significant but more confusing financial issues we'll be going over with them. And then there's one big ringer. The last line in the bill that's on the table about LNG is to get rid of what's known as the LNG Agreements Act, which we passed, which says that any agreements to do with the projects have to be made public. And they have said, oh, no, we're going to abolish that act and keep all the agreements secret. And they've put one up on the web saying, no, that's the agreement. It is not the agreement. It's a side agreement that they've put up. So this is classic NDP, playing games with the story, playing games with facts, hoping you won't notice, and they want you to run off and pay attention to something that they've drummed up, rather than the biggest industrial project in Canadian history that will transform the economy in northern British Columbia and create a stunning amount of work if the gas comes from British Columbia and if the workforce comes from British Columbia.
I think a lot of the media attention on this story this week kind of reflected on what could be described as a stunning turnaround on some of the, Andrew Weaver was reading some of the NDP members' previous statements on LNG, which could be described as somewhat divergent from their current policy.
Wow, what kind
what's
of
your take on
reporter
that?
are you? His attack ad ran for 2 hours. Andrew Weaver was perhaps for once coming to his senses and saying the Liberals got a much better deal out of the industry than the NDP did. And secondly, the NDP are complete hypocrites in this file. There's apparently a 20-page summary of all of the quotes from the NDP, noticeably Ralston, Michelle Mungle, the current energy minister, Horgan himself, just trashing the idea of an LNG industry. And lo and behold, flag of convenience, here they are, touting a deal that's not as good as the one the Liberals got.
I thought Ellis Ross spoke very powerfully on this. I had a chance to catch some of his speech in the legislature where he was saying, speaking to the NDP across the aisle, you guys are chuckling, but, the words you said, they mattered, and they emboldened protesters, and you yourselves joined the protest lines in a number of cases. You are leaders, and so what you say matters and carries weight, and for you to just chuckle about it now is kind of galling.
Yeah, this is one of those, about faces of the NDP seem to get away with. And it's really kind of galling when they've been out there encouraging protesters to block the project effectively. We all saw that in December when Doug Donaldson, the minister responsible for permitting, is out there with the Unistoten patting them on the back and saying, please, hope you have fun here on your protest line, in the face of a BC Supreme Court injunction telling them to take it down. So they're trying to play both sides of the fence still, and it's really annoying to sit there and listen to them spout the benefits of an industry while less than a year ago they're saying this is the worst thing that's ever happened to Western Canada.
It's unicorns and pixie dust, I believe, a year ago.
Exactly. So you might not have noticed, but they hardly got off their feet to talk about it favorably, because I think there's an awful lot of tension within NDP ranks between their Enviro faction, their social justice faction, their labor faction, and their strategic attack dogs. And they've decided this file is really kind of a loser for them, so they'd rather it just goes away.
Yeah. You got to kind of hand it to Horgan in one way. I mean, he takes these guys like Mungal and Lana Popham, who were viciously opposed to Site C, viciously opposed to LNG, sticks them in cabinet under cabinet solidarity, and now everything's hunky-dory with these projects.
Yeah, and we've been pointing that out. People like Lana Popham just have completely reversed their position on umpteen issues. And it's so galling, you don't know where to start. And yet, of course, if I decide to change the place I park my car, oh my God, that's a scandal.
Yeah.
Why are you driving a car? It's part of an outdated capitalist model based on fossil fuels.
Well, we should talk about driving cars, because how much you're paying to insure your car has suddenly become another top-of-the-mind issue here.
Yeah, we found a bit of a ringer. We've all had this idea that ICBC rates are going up and we're not getting a fair deal. And about 2 weeks ago, we came across an individual who was prepared to give us their invoices. They had one for 2018 for $3,700, and the one for 2019 is $8,040. A Volkswagen, a 27-year-old woman, lives in the Lower Mainland. What happened? Had a no injuries fender bender in an intersection in her Volkswagen. Poof! $8,000 in ICBC. Who can afford an $8,000 ICBC bill? So we've been showing that around to the media, and there's a little disbelief to start with, saying, oh, she must be a serial killer, or ran over 17 children in a crosswalk. And saying, no, this is a straightforward, simple event, and this is what David Eby and the NDP have to answer for. They were busy trashing us, and I have been very clear for a year that it's time to put all the options on the table, and we're summarizing it now, as I did on Kelowna Radio this morning. You deserve a choice. Let's look at all the models around the world, the English-speaking world. There are dozens of them. Why are we tied down to the magic of ICBC? This 46-year-old state-run monopoly has run its course. It doesn't work anymore. Why can't you have a choice? And let's start with the taxi industry. Why can't private insurers come in and offer them a different product? Why not?
Yeah.
Tell me why that shouldn't be allowed.
It should be allowed. I'm glowing with joy here, Maclean.
Well, at the very least, I mean, you're right. We can try. We can look. We can at least consider the possibility that there might be some other solution. I mean, if we were paying substantially lower rates than Alberta, for example, and getting the same product for paying less, then yeah, I would be the first to say, why would we touch it? But that is obviously not the case.
Yeah, and I think it's also an interesting time in that across Canada there are at least 5 different models. We're not allowed to talk about any of them under the NDP. That's somehow disloyal because ICBC is such a wonderful made in British Columbia solution. Hold on. When I get an $8,000 invoice for car insurance, I say, this model is broken.
Yeah.
Why can't I have a choice?
Well, and we talk so much about affordability in this province.
Yeah.
Oh, everything needs to be affordable,
Exactly.
affordability. The people who are going to get screwed on this are parents and anyone under the age of 30.
Yeah, and wait until you get this business of, oh, I'd like to loan you my car. Oh, that'll be at least a $50 extra fee. And maybe if you've had a fender bender 3 years ago, it'll be $600 to lend you the car for the weekend.
Yeah, and then we're talking not just beyond that. I mean, look, we have 3 kids, so we have a minivan. So when Grandma and Grandpa take the kids out, they take our minivan.
Oh, I hope
so.
so.
Now we have to list them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're jamming them into what could be a less safe car for the 5 of them to go in.
Yeah.
That's the first piece. The second piece is, what about fleets?
Oh, totally.
I work for a construction association. Our guys have numbers of trucks, and many of them are driven by various staffers who come off and on. And guess what? Most of these staffers are young. young men who are getting these work vans and go to work every morning. And you go on Highway 1, you'll see dozens of them from different companies, and they're going to get just put through the ringer on cost.
Yeah, so that raises the whole point. Tell me why we can't have a choice. Is there any good reason why we can't look at the models around the world, put price tags on them, and put it in the hands of consumers
Davey
to make a
Barrett's
decision?
rolling in his grave at the mere thought. Disco died. It's time for ICBC to go as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And all the other 70s creations.
And for a government that has not been shy to study things. I mean,
how many
why
millions
can't
of
we
dollars
at least
have been
get a
spent on
study?
studies? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and review things, and then actually make the decision before the review is even done. Ask those folks who are working on the employer health tax or the MSP piece.
Sounds like you're talking about the taxi business.
Yes, well, exactly. I mean, we can talk about rideshare. Look, this nonsense that there are ridings in Surrey that are will revolt if we allow ride sharing. It's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. In fact, some of the people I've talked to who are the most supportive of ride sharing are older and elderly Indo-Canadian people living in Surrey who want that final step between the bus and their home.
Oh, for sure.
And we're denying them because of a small, frankly, cabal, the taxi cartel, very rightfully named. That drives me crazy that we're even.
Well, can we talk about ride hailing too? Because I mean, the issue this week was whether the legislative committee, which had members from all three parties, came back and made a bunch of recommendations, and the one that was the trickiest apparently was Class 4 versus Class 5 licenses. The legislative committee recommended sticking with Class 5 licenses, and I don't know, 45 minutes later, it was released. The transportation minister said no.
Yeah, and there's a whole background to that of her saying how this needed intensive study and blah, blah, blah. And then 10 minutes after the report comes onto her desk, she's out in front of the microphone saying, no, we have to stick with a more detailed Class 4 license. The obvious question is, well, wait a second. 330 million people in the United States get by with a Class 5 equivalent license in this line of work. 500 million people in Europe get by with the equivalent license. What's the difference, the benefit between Class 4 and Class 5? And in question period last week, I was teasing them by saying, look, if we're going to get into super duper ultra safety in the ride hailing business, do we have to wear helmets and a 5-point seatbelt? I mean, are we getting into helicopters with no doors on them?
Please don't give them ideas. But
This is a big bubble wrap dispenser YVR. You put bubble wrap around the passengers and stick them in.
the amazing thing about this issue is they're still talking about it as if it's this completely hypothetical thing.
Yeah.
But as you point out, I mean, we're really kind of an island here. Oh, I'm literally on an island. But I mean, BC is kind of an island in that ride hailing is working across the Western world, and I mean, the sky has not fallen in. The Class 4, Class 5 thing is fine to have a hypothetical discussion about, but I mean, I don't see how it has created problems elsewhere.
Precisely, and this is, I think, my number one beef with the NDP and what keeps me going every day in this line of work. These guys, the NDP, want to build walls around British Columbia, separate it from the rest of the world, and pretend that we are a separate little planet with our own system of auto insurance, our own system of ride hailing that they have invented out of the clear blue sky. The rest of the world is just a big ugly threat, and it's a dangerous place, so we should build a wall around BC. Trans Mountain Pipeline's another one. I mean, grow up. We are highly integrated into the world economy. Look in the port of Vancouver and see the fleets of ships going back and forth out of Vancouver because we trade with the world. Go down to Blaine, Washington and see the amount of traffic going across the border. We are tightly integrated in North America, and the more integrated we are, the better we will do, and the better our people will do. Stop building walls around British Columbia. Stop these made in BC solutions that seem to be cooked up by the NDP for no good reason, and get us going in a better economy. You know, that budget that came out 6 weeks ago, not a word about the economy, not a word about opportunity or building skills and abilities in the province, just this walls around BC mentality. And the assumption they make every single time, the tax revenue is going to keep rolling in because they're entitled to it. In fact, they might just raise a little bit to teach people a lesson because they pick enemies and friends every day. They pick winners and losers. And I think the ICBA, more than anybody else, knows how they pick winners and losers.
Yeah. In fact, we have tax increases coming on Monday, April 1st. We are the April Fools. Carbon tax increase, that's 1.1 cents. Then you have a 2 cent a liter increase in Greater Victoria, which when I was back with the Taxpayers Federation, I managed to, constantly every year convince Todd Stone not to do, even though the Greater Victoria folks wanted it. And 1.5 cents per liter for TransLink of all people, as if they don't get enough money out of us. We have the highest gas taxes in North America here in the Lower Mainland. We have, not coincidentally, the highest gas prices in North America here in the Lower Mainland. But hey, we're making life more affordable. That's
Yeah,
the NDP
this is
way.
a classic. I'm coming in from Maple Ridge, which is kind of at the edge of the commuter belt from Vancouver yesterday, and I think, well, I better gas up. So I pull in at 146.9 and fill up the car, drive back into Vancouver, and lo and behold, it's still the same here last night. And then this morning, driving out here, $1.56.9, and this is before the carbon tax increment.
Yeah.
So, and there's a motor fuel tax increment as well. So we'll be well over $1.60 next week. And we have said repeatedly, Premier Horgan, give people a break. You talk about affordability all the time. This is core to people's lives. You know that huge protest movement in France? That was triggered by gas pump prices.
Yeah. Yeah, look, there's easy, even for him, like, there's easier paths. Like, okay, if you're going to do the carbon tax, at least go to the federal government and say, hey, quit charging GST on the other taxes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Lobby, do something.
Sorry. Is
Something.
this Taxpayers Federation meeting?
You can take the tax fighter out of the Taxpayers Federation. We can't do that. Anyways.
And if
Still
you
here.
have to raise taxes, please don't raise taxes on April 1st. I would never have allowed that.
Yes.
I suspect you as Premier would never allow that.
Well, it's a poor choice of dates. Let's put it that
I've
way.
always found it funny that the government's annual year starts on April Fool's Day fiscal year. I've always thought that's probably a sign. Hey, I want to talk about an issue. I know you're going from here. We're in our Metrotown studio. You're headed out to Langley, my hometown, actually just a few blocks from my house. You're going to Darvonda Nurseries, who are having the dumbest fight with the Agricultural Land Commission. Not because of Darvonda, but because of the Agricultural Land Commission. This is where activist governments are dangerous.
Yeah.
You have Lana Popham, who is a true believer in all things agriculture. And look,
But
having more BC produce in hospitals is great.
Yeah, she's a true believer in the kind of Farmer Joe in his
religious,
overalls with 3 chickens and 2 cows.
Yeah.
When it comes to actually running a farm, that's not allowed.
Well, that guy's not even a farmer. He's not a person anymore under this new act that they've brought in. Look, I was on municipal council in Langley for 2 terms. The single most difficult planning issues we had to deal with involved the Agricultural Land Commission. 78% of Langley is in the ALR. But we use that to densify urban areas and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
The problem is now you've got people who have legitimate usages for their property being told they can't use it because it doesn't fit with Lana Popham's view of agriculture.
Right.
And if they want a different use, they have to go and pretend to be a municipal government or a First Nation in order to get an application.
Yeah.
Remember talking a minute ago about building walls around British Columbia, coming up with your own concepts and your own rules and their NDP rules, so they got to be right? This is one where there are some basic principles about land ownership. The whole concept of fee simple means you're supposed to own it down to the core of the earth. In Canada, there's the whole issue of mineral rights. There in the Agricultural Land Reserve, it's a bit like zoning that you're supposed to apply to make changes in use. Well, lo and behold, the NDP come up a couple of weeks ago and say, well, actually, farmer, producer, agricultural person who owns the land, you don't really own the land because you're not even allowed to apply for a change of use. And think about that for a minute. This is supposed to be land that you own. What does own mean? Own now means subject to Lana Popham's feelings about what you should do with your life. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And we push back on this hard and we'll continue to push back hard because they changed the definition of person who's allowed to apply. It no longer includes farmers. It only includes governments. So think about that for a second. Only the state can decide what you can do with land that you supposedly own.
Yeah.
What country do we live in?
Yeah. Look, you should have every right to apply to do whatever you want with your land, and governing agencies should have every right to say yes or no based on their regulation.
Yep.
It's fine. There was no problem here. Langley, probably one of the most, probably has as many applications as any other municipality, maybe 5 or 6 a year. The Agricultural Land Commission can handle that workload. This and the cap on housing sizes in the ALR really bothers me as a South Fraser resident. Because number one, I think the cap on house sizes is it's a racist policy because they're basically hurting Indo-Canadian families who believe in multi-generational, multiple generations living in the same home. And they're going after these farmers who, no longer have the right to even request to do something different with their land. It's just, it boggles my mind.
On the house size thing, we have yet to get an answer to the question. If you're trying to preserve the use of the soil to grow stuff, we get that. So you should put your house close to the edge of the property so there isn't a mile-long driveway. And what's wrong with setting aside a footprint of X hundred square meters and they could build up or go down with a basement? Instead, the NDP come along and say, no, we know how to run your life better than you. You're not that bright even though you own this place, and you're not that bright even though it's your money to build this house. So we're going to tell you exactly the square footage of the entire house. Doesn't matter how many stories it is. And so you and I say, well, if you're trying to preserve the agricultural land, lay out the size of the footprint and let them do what they want to.
Can you imagine the whirlwind that would come for a BC Liberal government if you changed, I don't know, the tax code to say a person may apply for an exemption, but a person may only be a corporation? I mean, the world would end. And quite reasonably. I mean, because telling people that they're not people is one of those things that the average voter, they pick up on and they just shake their head.
Yeah, and as Jordan said, there's a whole level of ethnic undertone to this that this country's trying to get out of. And let's not forget, there's a whole ethnic agenda too that David Eby's on about housing, that we're supposed to have gotten over that stuff 70 years ago. It was a huge embarrassment to us as a society, and these guys are trotting it out in very quiet ways that we're not supposed to notice. Well, guess what, David Eby and Lana Popham, we did notice, and it's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to ask you about one other issue that's near and dear to ICBA's heart, and that's some coming reforms in the labor code. Possibly the removal of the secret ballot and union certification votes, and of course these, they call them community benefit agreements. What they are is a sweetheart deal with unions who gave the NDP $2.5 million bucks. ICBA, we appreciate the work that you and the caucus have done on this file. You've had some blistering question periods, pinning them down. They have no real defense on it, but where do we go from here? And is it just a matter, is the only way to really stop this either, is to build enough public support to, force them and vote the bums out?
Yeah, I think one of the most fundamental things that they've done, which is just plain wrong, is to say 85% of the construction workforce is not good enough to work on government projects. And any civilian you talk to, any normal human being will say, what? I mean, why is that? And the answer is, you're not in a union, or even worse, you're in the wrong union local, because your guys didn't give us money in the past. I mean, if you did this in Mozambique or Albania, this would be a corruption scandal. Here somehow it's okay because they're friends of the NDP. This is fundamentally wrong. And I cannot see the NDP changing their mind on this. So to Jordan's point, I think the only way it's going to get unraveled is with a change of government.
I mean, you touched on it before. It's a related issue, but it's separate, is the possibility of maybe moving away from a secret ballot for union certification, which, I mean, I just don't see an argument for at all. And I'm not anti-union, but I am certainly pro-secret ballot.
Yeah, there's a whole kind of phenomenon around this that the NDP like to push this now and then, and most parties across Canada would say, well, that's unnecessary. Why are you doing that? And the NDP are relentless on this stuff. They seem to have been held back on this one, we don't know, but by the Greens or just by the sense that union favoritism can only go so far. So what have they done? They pulled all those 4,000 home care workers into government-employed unionized positions. They've pulled all of the government contracting and major projects into unionized positions. They've signed collective agreements up the yin-yang that appear to be quite generous. And so this one they seem to be pausing about. But I think the lesson here is, if this is what they've done with a minority hair-trigger majority government, then what would they do if they actually got a majority? Look out.
Yeah, no, exactly right. Dr. Weaver?
Oh, yes. Well,
is there any... The enjoyable part for the last week for me is seeing him rip the NDP after all of these months of everything being the BC Liberals' fault, even though you haven't been able to make a decision with the levers of power in 2 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Now finally he seems to have realized, hey, wait a minute, after Prop Rep failed, oh geez, I guess I better differentiate myself from these guys.
Exactly, and so I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. 18 months of NDP Green coalition. Andrew Weaver's It's going to stop Site C in its tracks. Going to stop LNG. Going to make sure he gets what he wants in climate change.
We're gonna get Prop Rep passed. It'll be the next
proper pass. 0 for 4.
Yeah.
And what does he do? He turns around and says, oh, well, if you won't do what I insist you had to do, then I'll have to vote for you. I mean, the bizarreness of this situation is hard to understand. And now this week, after the Nanaimo by-election and the Prop Rep collapse, the Greens are obviously losing a bit of confidence. He's desperate to get attention to stay relevant. And so what does he do? He gets up and makes the most inflammatory speeches he can. And when he knows that we're going to vote in favor of the LNG proposition, that's the only time he's prepared to run around and vote against the NDP. The only time is when he's got cover from a vote of 82-3. That's the only time he finds the gumption to go out and actually say what he stands for.
And for a party that backed proportional representation as hard as it did, it's kind of hard to say, well, they have 3 members in the legislature and a provincial vote of, I can't remember the percentage, but let's say it's 15%. Well, that means 85% of the people who voted in this province voted in favor of LNG by that logic. And so, yeah, I don't.
Yeah, the vote count's about the same in the legislature, isn't it?
Yeah.
Be fair, though, because I don't recall the NDP running on a pro-LNG platform. So
that is a very good point. That is a very good point.
You know, if you're voting for Michelle Mungo, I don't think you were voting for LNG.
Well, I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but apparently there's some kind of rally planned or a funeral planned in Nelson to commemorate the death of her credibility.
Oh, wow.
So we'll see where that goes.
That's entertaining. Maybe a visit to Nelson in my future here. I got to see this for myself.
No, you're not allowed to go to the rally.
Oh, I'm not allowed to go to the rally. Okay, well, that's fine. That's fair to go. Well, let's talk. A few weeks ago, BC Liberal Party launched a new portal trying to identify new candidates. I thought this was I think this is the first in Canadian politics. I don't recall any party doing something like this, trying to identify people from outside the circle.
Yeah.
One of the great successes in 2013 that Christie doesn't get credit for is she found great candidates to run. Yeah. And she managed to pull together.
Well, thank you.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, present company accepted, of course. So she managed to find a great team to run, and she gets all the great retail politician, and the jobs message, blah blah blah, and that was important. But the candidates brought a local credibility. Yeah. You did the same with Tony Harris in Nanaimo.
Yeah.
First
class candidate.
Yeah. Record level really of support in Nanaimo, other than that one outlier to 01 election. How do we find more Tony Harrises in this province to run for the BC Liberals?
Well, we approached that very question and said, what do we do? We cannot become an insider club like the NDP have become, where the brothers and sisters pull somebody aside and say, you're going to be the candidate in Podunk South. We said, no, let's just do this wide open. So we opened up a portal where people could actually make an application to be considered as a candidate. 200 people came in with a full expectation and a full dossier so that they can be reviewed. Their social media posts are being screened right now. And yesterday I ran into one of them in the Valley, and he said he is totally serious about this. He appreciated he didn't have to be seen as someone who was in the know and had friends in the right places. I've never been one of the cool people on the inside. I've always been on the outside looking in. So I always appreciate it when there's a clear pathway for anybody with the right interest and the right commitment to express interest and get engaged. So this is a really exciting prospect. I've said before, we've got at least 3 retirements coming up, and that means we'll be looking for new blood in all of those ridings, and it's going to be an exciting time. And I expect we'll have a great team of candidates ready for the next election. The question is, when's it going to be? They've got till 2021 if they can keep their act together. If this week's any indication in the legislature, Andrew Weaver is mad as a hatter, and it's all going to come to an end. But then he'll turn around and vote for them anyway.
That's right. No, exactly. You mentioned 2021. It is, with the retirements coming up, I don't think, Rob Shaw and folks like that, right? Oh, we need renewal in the BC Liberals. We need renewal in the BC Liberals. The problem is, how do you renew for an election that you don't know when it could come?
Well, we talk to our MLAs. We have a very, very loyal team of people. Yeah. We've got 42 people who get along. We have a huge range of opinion and style and profile within the caucus itself. And those folks are all committed to the idea we are going to be ready to win the next time. And so we will time these retirements in an appropriate way to get the right level of interest. And, if the NDP suddenly pull out the plug on April Fool's Day on Monday, we'll be ready.
Perfect. Maclean, anything else from you?
I one last question about this process for correcting new candidates. I have a feeling this is the kind of thing that's going to be normal across the country in 10, 20 years. Aside from local credibility, do you think it's going to have some success in getting sort of, more diverse ethnic candidates, more women? I mean, I read in Katie Merrifield, her initial communication on that. She was saying that she feels that this is going to be one of the results.
Absolutely. And interestingly, the people coming in, particularly women, this provides what you could call a level playing field. It's an open door. It's not something where you've got to be one of the good old boys. I sure wasn't one of the good old boys. And that's what we're getting past and saying, look, we're going to have a wide open arrangement where really capable people are welcome to come in and join the party and put themselves forward as a candidate. We obviously have to vet them to make sure they've got the right kind of background and there's nothing messy there. But at the same time, it means it's a fair playing field, an open organization. Come on in, let's get on with it and get ready to beat the NDP.
Look, I think some of your most visible MLAs right now, they fit into these categories, right? Michelle Stilwell, Jazz Johal, Tracy Reddy's, Mary Polak.
Yeah.
Mary's work on that Legislative Management Committee was, I've watched Mary for years. I live in Langley. I voted for her a few times.
She is a very capable
I had no idea.
person.
She should have been a lawyer.
Well, I was a lawyer for 25 years, and she'd come out of those meetings, and I'd get the debrief and the stuff that wasn't on camera, and I said, when did you go to law school? You're an honorary member of the bar now.
She was dissecting those guys. It was great.
So, and relentlessly too.
Yes, and so that team, there's not other than there's not a white guy among them, right? Like, it is a team that is evolving, and I don't think the Liberals get enough credit for that.
Absolutely, and of course there are all these stereotypes that we get saddled with that the NDP spit out there. Their current thing is that I'm an elitist. Oh my gosh. Mo Sahota gets on the radio and says, I went to St. George's private school. Pause. He went to St. George's. I went to Lethbridge Collegiate Institute where I took automotive courses and, graduated with a bunch of kids who went into the trades and farming.
We gotta get you your red seal and something.
I'm not up to that standard.
They can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, the NDP are not going to fight fair, as we've seen from radio ads this week on CKNW. They're not going to fight clean.
Scary.
They're doing what NDPers do.
Yeah, and it's impressive how they seem to have this sense that coming out of organized labor, they can get away with anything because they're the oppressed class somehow. I mean, give me a break. These guys are aggressive and vicious and nasty, and then they put John Horgan out as Mr. Sweetness and Light. And we've got to get people to connect the dots here.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Any scoops for the last few weeks of session?
Well, I think we're going to see this LNG thing go through its life cycle. There's the agricultural land reserve stuff that we've talked about already, about this denial of farmers of the status of being a person in Canada. And there are other things coming along that are going to get interesting. But our job, of course, is to keep them honest and keep focused on things like ICBC, which are independent legislation. You deserve a choice. And you deserve to know what the options are and not be told by David Eby, there's only one choice, take it or leave it. You either walk or you pay David Eby, forget it.
Yeah, well, one thing we can be assured of with David Eby is that anytime you get a little bit of momentum, he'll have a press conference or there'll be a leak on some sort of organized crime thing. It's his old standby.
Yeah.
But if you have an ICBC bill that has skyrocketed, go see your local BC Liberal MLA. I'm sure they'll be very excited to talk to you.
Yeah, we want to see those ones that have taken the big boost because it gives the public a sense of that's about me, that could happen to me. Anytime you talk about billions in this world, it's a bit of a farce. The people just tune it out. And that's the problem with LNG is that the general public say, well, it's too big and too far away and I don't really understand it. Whereas ICBC, everybody understands.
Perfect.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, Andrew, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. It's you're doing the you're doing the Lord's work over there, and it's true.
No, not the Lord's work. The people of British Columbia
I
work
can say
trying
it,
to make
Maclean.
their
I can say
life
it
better.
I'm not an independent media person. I'm a terribly biased construction guy, tax-fighting guy. Thank you again, Andrew, and kudos to you and your team, and please do keep up the great work. I'm looking forward to the pre-noon comments on Monday, April Fool's Day from your group. I'm hoping for some needling and some comedic
We had our
action.
share of April Fools yesterday about bear arms in the legislature. I was driving through Coquitlam and I thought, this has got to be a joke.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. We'll come up with better jokes on Monday.
It's Gerald Plekis' world, people. We just live in it. Thank you for watching. You can follow us at The Orchid BC on Twitter, facebook.com/The Orchid BC, or YouTube, bit.ly/The Orchid TV. I see we're everywhere.
Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks, Andrew.
We'll see you, Maclean.
Take care, Maclean.
You will.